the Viv DeWalker, head of the Canton Foundation. Two very interesting clips. One where he mentions how he left Hedera and came to work for digital asset, Canton Network. And then the second one, he talks about institutions and how they're likely to choose Canton based off of all the things that are happening right now in the market. I just want you guys to hear those perspectives. Then I want to go over, what it is that I'm looking at for tomorrow, primarily FOMC meeting in minutes. And then I want to touch on my XRP, Solana, and Canton update for the general public, right? Because we've just been giving the dark pools and deltas for XRP, Canton, and Solana. And I just want to do a brief update on that prior to the FOMC meeting in minutes. So first, starting off here, let me just share the audio for this real quick. You guys can take a brief listen. For anybody that's bullish on Canton, bend your ear.
Institutional grade tech, but primarily it was DeFi use cases. And then the majority of my focus there was building out the ancillary tooling, the service layer, the capabilities that any network needs for its builders to be successful. And, providing these infrastructure and ancillary tooling is one thing, but how do you measure it? So there's a complementary piece all around the instrumentation, the analytics, and how do you make this quantifiable and meaningful? So if you think of Canton today, the ecosystem is going through such a massive growth, and the foundation's role is to shepherd and make sure that the conditions are right for the Cambrian explosion of sorts that's going to come. So that's roughly the journey that brought me here, but on a personal level as well, I like to go where the work is, where the fire is, so to speak. And, I'd done what I'd set out to do at the Hedera Foundation, and, Canton has a long road ahead of us. And I think Canton Foundation is going to be the entity that takes us there. And, the fit and the timing were perfect.
Okay.
So I thought that was interesting, being that HBAR is one of the biggest, digital assets in my portfolio. I have over 900,000 HBAR. I had over 1 million at one point, but I sold a little bit this last cycle. And this gentleman came from Hedera and started to work now as the head of the Canton Foundation, and said that he believes Canton is where the Cambrian explosion is going to be. I found that to be of interest. Just something I, pay attention to what people say and where they previously worked. And this is now the second person that has come from another layer one. For example, Adelia Tortman, who used to previously work as at a VP role in Ripple for Ripple X. She also left Ripple and came over to work at Digital Asset in Canton. So I just found that to be of interest, that now we have another individual from the Hedera network that has now come and, now works at Canton Foundation. Second thing that is said here, and again, this is just speculation, could mean absolutely nothing. But the way that I think about this is, ex-Ripple employees, if you go over to like Adelia Tortman's LinkedIn profile, she's now constantly boasting about Canton and how for the first time ever, Canton's doing this. Canton settling repo, this, and that. And I think about all the announcements that she used to make with Ripple. And now she's saying things for the first time, like key vocabulary for the first time. So that perspective is just very interesting, considering that she used to work at a conglomerate like Ripple, where, of course, the XRPL comes from, and, just evolution and old chains versus new networks and where the money might really flow in the future. Just being diversified and just paying attention. And now we see the same thing from a previous Hedera representative perspectives, where they're not saying they think Hedera is going to be where the Cambrian explosion is going to be. He just said it. I think Canton's going to be where the Cambrian explosion is going to be. So what in his mind has he seen where he used to previously work at Hedera and now has come over and shifted his perspective to Canton? That's kind of like my level of thinking. I feel like that's healthy speculation to be diversified between the two, right? Next, we have him going on to talk about institutions and how they'll choose Canton and how these pilots that they're going through right now aren't for nothing.
How do institutions, they have their own goals, yes, interest in Canton network. So how do you keep the Canton Foundation's vision balanced and neutral?
So let's talk about vision first. So the thing that we need to look at is who is participating. So yesterday we had the DTCC soft launch of the use case that involved almost 40 partners. Now, these are not the caliber of people who are going to try something out, put it in production, and then decide, in 5 years or not, that this is not the thing that was most suited for what their use case was. So when we talk about vision, the foundation needs to have a very long-term vision. So we're not talking, what I'm going to do for the next quarter or the next year. Like, it's a sliding window measured in years. Obviously, there are immediate things that we're tackling on a daily basis, and this is what we're going to deliver this month, this quarter, and so forth. But from a vision perspective, we need to think about where we're going to be, and we are going to be around in the long term, and our members are also going to be around long term. So this comes into, so with that framing, the neutrality piece becomes absolutely imperative, because it is one of, if not the most important pillar of the foundation. We lose this and the entire value and future of the network collapses, because, as I mentioned with our stakeholders, it's not just the members, it's also the users, the investors, the regulators. We have so many. So coordination and balance of this is the priority that we have every day. So how do we openly and fairly serve these stakeholders for the benefit of everyone without favoring any single one? And the mechanics of how Canton Foundation is set up and operates reflect this in a big way. So I mentioned earlier, we have very well-defined, but at the same time, it's not static. We actively maintain our bylaws. And I've been with the foundation 4 and a bit months. We've already changed bylaws twice.
So anyways, he pretty much said that this whole thing with the DTCC is the foundation of the network. And if that falls through, then the network is going to go away. But he also reiterated at the beginning that the institutions that are running these tests and these proof of concepts and piloting all this stuff right now, they're not doing it for no reason. So that to me gives me an optimistic long-term perspective, because he specifically mentioned the long-term, to buckle down while prices are discounted at this current moment in time and not see it as a fear-based environment, instead an opportunistic moment to capitalize on a piece of the future financial infrastructure of this new digital era, right? So leading over into tomorrow and going over price action updates on XRP, Solana, and Canton. We'll start on Canton first, since we dropped on Canton representatives in today's breakdown. I'm focusing tomorrow on the FOMC meeting in minutes, which will be one of the most major events this week. If we see some good rhetoric, we could see a muted event where the rhetoric comes out just leaving the markets in an uncertain environment and we don't get any confirmation, hawkish or dovish. But the actual words inside the meeting in minutes is what's going to matter. What's going to matter even more for us as traders is how the bond market and rate futures interrupt or interpret the meeting in minutes, right? So does the market start to increase or decrease the expectations of another Fed rate hike after tomorrow's meeting minutes? If the odds of a rate hike decrease based off the rhetoric that the FOMC meeting in minutes brings tomorrow, this could be a case for a bullish environment tomorrow on crypto. I'm not expecting some massive bullish rally, but we at least see crypto hold support. We don't see any dwindling prices, and we maybe kind of see some consolidation and price remain at where it's at today, or we do see a slight bullish recovery. There are obviously, of course, still major things happening in the background, like the Middle East tensions, ongoing inflationary concerns, higher oil prices that are still weighing on the current market sentiment that need to change before we see or come out of this bear market. But still, nonetheless, this would be a good sign. It is one of the many things that we would need to start to see to get us out of this bearish rut. On the opposite side, if we see increase rate hike expectations due to the language that the FOMC meeting in minutes delivers, then of course that would be a case for concern. We'd likely see higher treasury yields. We'd probably see higher dollar. We'd probably see increased probability of rate hikes. And that would usually, in the past, historically, tends to weigh on risk assets. So bearish scenarios likely would unfold tomorrow. And then, of course, topple that with continued Middle East rhetoric that is negative. Negotiations continue to, not become peaceful. Military, actions continue both sides, whether it's Iran attacking Israel or, any other jurisdictions, or whether it's United States attacking Iran, Oman, so on and so forth, any escalations that don't show signs of de-escalation that lead to higher oil prices leading into the market, pricing in a probability of a spike in inflation later on down the road, and a spike in inflation later on down the road keeps the Fed on hold for longer, along with other major central banks as well, in a more hawkish environment, which is not good for risk assets. All right. So that leads me over here to my market update. First, Canton. Right now, we have been warning about the possibility, and I feel like we were probably one of the only communities on the internet warning about the possibility of a lower Canton price. I did not buy any Canton above 12 cents because we were waiting for this drop in price. Now, I do have some Canton that is sitting in a loss right now slightly, but it is not a very large position. It is about 10,000 Canton that I bought at 12 cents that is now at a loss. But most of my Canton is still in profit, as I bought most of my Canton at around 6 cents. So that's still good news. Right now, Canton is currently trading slightly below the 09453 dark pool, a level that we had highlighted all the way back as a key area of opportunity back in April 2026. So the bullish scenario for today and heading into the rest of this week is if buyers can reclaim the 09453 and turn it into support, this could open up the door for a recovery towards the next major upside hurdle around 12257. Very straightforward. For now, however, sellers remain in control. Continued suppression below the 09453 keeps the door open for another leg towards the next dark pool around the 07859 and potentially even as low as the 05800. So real fast, taking a look at Canton's price action. What do we need to see to get us out of this bearish rut? Right now, we can see that sellers are holding price at the dark pool at the 09453. We have now seen sellers trap buyers. Buyers have been unable to sustainably hold above the dark pool at the 09453, and sellers have just recently broken beneath it. If this most recent base at the low of the 08330 delta fails to hold price, then the path of least resistance still remains skewed to the downside, and the next bearish target becomes the 07859. Buyers will have a chance to defend at these lower levels. If they cannot defend and we break below the 07859, we see a bearish close below. We start to see that level act as a resistance. That is going to be a case for concern and will open the door for the 05800. At these next two lower levels on Canton, I will be buying a substantial amount of Canton. Then, of course, to the downside, just in case we still do have dark pools, which would scare the shit out of a lot of people, at the 02602 and the 0001 on Canton. Now, as crazy as that is to say, people were calling us crazy when we were calling for a 9-cent Canton back when it was trading above 15 cents, all here in this area back at the beginning of the year. But now look, here we are. So I'm keeping some alerts and some alarms on my charts just in case. These are the levels to the downside on Canton to be mindful of. To the upside, we need to see a sustainable break and hold above the 09453 before we get optimistic on any future bullish move. If we can turn 09453 into support, as you can see, we recently broke it here. However, buyers were unable to hold it. If we can turn it into support, that would be a case for upside potential on Canton. The next hurdle comes in at the 12257, where the 50 moving average on the daily coexists. A sustainable break above 12257, and then we can start to talk about some higher prices on Canton. But for now, these are the major upside hurdles. 09453, sustainable break and hold above, opens the door for 12257. I'll stop there. I'm sure that we'll have more updates before we reach those levels. Coming over to Solana. Solana is still holding phenomenally above that 74.38 dark pool that we touched on in our last update. We had mentioned on Solana that we were operating in this bullish environment, even though higher time frame still bearish. We recently made a bullish move between the 63.60 dark pool all the way up into the 65.11. We had highlighted this last down candle taking us up into this bullish structure and mentioned that as long as price trades above this base and trades above these intermediate dark pools, that the path of least resistance still remains skewed in favor of buyers. So for now, that sentiment still holds weight. Price above 74.38 still opens the door for a revisitation of the 80.14 and the 85.11. Above the 85.11, just in case of an extremely optimistic environment, we have 94.16 and a 103.08 next on our radar to the upside, but we have some hurdles to overcome before we get there. If price cannot sustainably break above the 80.14, that would be a case for concern. We start to see 74.38 give way, acting as a previous support, turns into resistance, and we see sellers become aggressive beneath it, opens the door for a revisitation of the top of this base at the 69.72. Anything below 69.72, and I will become concerned, as we will likely see price dematerialize and come down into the next dark pool at around 63.60, and the overall bearish target, where I would love to accumulate some Solana at this price, of 54.74 to the downside. For now, buyers remain in control above 74.38. XRP. I think this is the longest that XRP is consolidated at around $1 in over 2 years. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens to the downside, as we are currently operating in no man's land and between a dark pool at the 0.91073 and the 1.075 as the dark pool at the 103 and the 109 no longer exists. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. Do we see buyers start to accumulate orders here in this area? Sellers start to get absorbed. Buyers start to become aggressive. If we can see that, the first institutional hurdle comes in at the $1.07. If we can see where we can see this previous aggressive seller turn passive, trapping buyers, if we can see that area turn into support, I will start to get optimistic of a higher recovery on XRP, with the first hurdle after that coming in at $1.16. If we can break above $1.16 in a bullish environment and see supportive fundamentals, that'll open up the door for the next bullish hurdles of anywhere between $1.36 and $1.29. Price underneath of $1.07 still opens the door for a much deeper drop on XRP's price, which I'm personally favoring because I do have some buy limits sitting at these areas of interest. Price suppressed underneath $1.07, like I said in the update, keeps keeps 91 cents on the radar. Or failure to break above $1.07, and we could still see an environment like this, with 91 cents coming as the next bearish target. In an extreme case, just keep in mind some alerts and alarms on your charts, albeit it's a little bit extensive to go there, but still possible nonetheless. Better be prepared than not. 68-cent dark pull to the downside underneath of 91 cents. And underneath of that, we do have a delta that comes in at 44 to 51 cents, where I will personally be like backing up the freaking truck. So we know the upside hurdles before we get excited on XRP's price. Anybody telling you that price is going to go to freaking $1,000 if it's not trading above $1.07, we know is lying, because we know, using order flow and institutional dark pools and deltas, that we had a previous aggressive buyer here that tried to become passive in this area that failed miserably. Sellers then trapped those buyers, broke back through the dark pool aggressively, and then turned passive. And so now we have sellers that are passively defending this dark pool. So it's logically to assume that as long as sellers continue to passively defend this area, the path of least resistance is still skewed in favor of sellers. Until this level is broken and turned into support, then we have to assume further downside still exists on XRP, right? Outside of that, those are the quick updates. I'll make sure to tap back in with you all either this weekend or post FOMC meeting in minutes if we see any volatile price action. If not, PA is probably not going to formulate any volatile moves until this weekend. Israel, United States, Iran news on the forefront, right?
Great call. Thank you, man.
No problem. You guys and gals take it easy, all right?
Thank you, sir. Thanks,
See you all
everyone.
tomorrow.
Peace.